Hey everybody, welcome to Apocalypse Rising. Thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody's doing well. I was kind of feeling sick yesterday a little bit. Thought, am I getting the Rona? But I feel better today, so I don't know, maybe it was just winter allergies. It's like my coworker said, I don't know if I believe in that. I don't think I've ever had winter allergies, but maybe it was dust from the heating system or something like that. But luckily I'm feeling better, so hopefully that was just a weird little 24-hour bug or something that I got there. But anyway, I just kind of want to explain my channel a little bit for anybody who's new and watching. I do say a lot of things that are a little bit kind of sound like I'm being a smartass, and I am really. What this whole channel's purpose is to have people watch and maybe read the article that I link. I'll always link the article in the description box below, and comment, especially have a conversation with each other, respond to the things that I'm saying, because in all reality, a lot of the stuff I'm saying is just purely opinion, and it's opinion that I've developed by reading things and just observing reality basically over time. And the whole point is that a lot of times people get stuck in this idea that, they have their perspective, and then if anything goes against that, they're not going to pay any attention to it. And I think that's a problem, especially as it concerns critical thinking. It's kind of like that whole principle. Well, I voted Republican because my dad was a Republican, and he voted Republican because his dad was a Republican. You get stuck in this funk of not looking outside of what the norm is for you. So a channel like this that's a little bit more on the kooky side, sometimes that can rile people up or get them to think a little bit outside the box, and that's the whole point. So to summarize what we've done so far, we've talked about melting ice, melting permafrost, forest fires, that kind of stuff, basically what's going on with the climate, and also some solutions to those issues and what we've come up with thus far, especially from a scientific perspective. There's a social perspective as well, and I haven't gotten into that yet. I've touched on it a little bit, but we'll get into that a little bit more as things move along. And so far, in terms of the solutions that we've looked at, it's basically 2 strikes and 2 foul balls. These nuts. So we haven't struck out yet, but we also haven't hit any home runs. So we're kind of just looking at this, I don't want to say objectively, because I don't really believe in that word. I think it's one of those words that people tend to think is a reality, like, oh, it's an objective view on something, but there's always subjectivity that plays into it. I think that's just part of reality, and so we can't fool ourselves with that. And basically, I've just been going over articles that I found on my phone. It's interesting because once you kind of do these things, you can see the algorithm going to work on your phone or on the internet. Maybe you have a YouTube feed or whatever it is. When you start clicking on things, it'll start showing you more of that stuff. And so now basically my phone is just pretty much all climate change. That's all I've really been clicking on and sending it to myself so that I have a lot of articles to look over. So today I found one, and let me see, which one is this? Okay, so this one is titled 2020 is a preview of how bad things can get if we don't fix climate change, other systemic problems, the Lancet report. So the reason why I like this one is because it's based on a Lancet report, and generally the Lancet is seen as a pretty credible source. But you also have to take in consideration that this is an article on top of the Lancet report. So take it with a grain of salt here. We're going to see what this Catherine Clifford has to say about the Lancet report. And this is from CNBC.com. So don't get your panties in a ruffle if you're a Fox News viewer only.
Daniel?
I think that's the whole point of this channel, is that, well, maybe you should check this out and see what it says. Okay, so let's get into it. Of course, we got a picture here of fire. Fire's been a big issue this year. We reviewed an article talking about how supposedly because of COVID-19, we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions in 2020 by 9.2%. But then when you go and you put the fires into the equation and the CO2 that emits, and this is just the fires in the United States, it brings that number down to 6.4%. And I don't even know if I believe that. I think it's probably more CO2 than that. But you also have to consider that on a global scale, you have fires like the ones that were in Australia that were just putting out massive amounts of CO2. Not to mention, once these forests burn down and we continue to deforest for agriculture and logging and whatnot, the less CO2 is absorbed from the atmosphere back into these forests. So there's also that to contend with. And that's kind of basically, this sums up 2020, in my opinion, this picture right here. So let's see what the article has to say. The world is getting warmer, but the global response has remained muted, despite efforts like the Paris Climate Agreement, which we aren't part of right now, and millions of lives are at risk as a result. Probably billions. This, according to a report published Wednesday by the Lancet, a leading peer-reviewed medical journal. So I don't know if this report was peer-reviewed. This is something that I also hope people get out of my channel, is that, you need to read between the lines, because this doesn't say that this particular thing was peer-reviewed. It just says that the Lancet is a peer-reviewed medical journal. So don't get caught up in thinking, oh, well, they just said that this whole thing they're about to talk about was peer-reviewed. Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes there are articles and things that come out in these medical journals that have yet to be peer-reviewed. This past year, we have seen the harms of our converging crisis: COVID-19, climate disasters, and systemic racism. It's been a preview of what lies ahead if we fail to urgently make the necessary investments to protect health. Well, this is what's interesting. If you see here, we're talking about a virus, which is a pandemic, a climate crisis, and social unrest. So these are three separate things all playing out at once. My opinion is, and the reason I focus so much on climate change, is that, yeah, we probably could solve climate change. I'm not going to sit here and say that climate change is, a foregone conclusion that we're going to die from it. Eventually we will, but maybe not in the next 10 to 15 years like I portray on this channel. However, if we let other things distract us, like social unrest, economic collapse, world war, famine, pestilence, if those things kind of start taking up our time and our energy, we're not going to be able to focus on climate change. And then you really are going to see it come really fast, because we need to start doing stuff now to prevent it from getting worse, let alone to give us an opportunity to solve the problem altogether. Salas is an emergency room doctor and says, just like in my emergency department, I can't take one health problem and place it in isolation, because one insult on the body creates new problems and worsens old ones. So basically, like I was saying, I mean, this could be a domino effect, a cascading effect, where one thing leads to another, and then climate change is just kind of the end result. And I say climate change, I mean climate catastrophe.
He needs some milk.
We must take an integrated approach when tackling these challenges. Climate action is the prescription we need for better health and equity as we emerge from this pandemic. I mean, really, this pandemic has given us an opportunity to kind of see what's really going on, what's wrong, kind of expose some of the cracks of our global civilization. And we're either going to learn from that or we're not. And it seems like we're really rushing back into old ways as fast as we can. We just want it to go back to quote unquote normal. And that's what's led us to this point. I personally believe that the pandemic is caused by climate change and overpopulation. So there's going to be more pandemics. we're just lucky that science has come through with an mRNA vaccine, which is still untested. This is the first one of its kind. We'll see if it has any long-term effects. Heck, we'll see if COVID-19 mutates around it and just keeps on infecting and killing people. We don't really know, but it's definitely a result of us not taking heed to what Mother Nature is telling us. Mother Nature! I mean, we're basically just taking advantage of our resources and not thinking about the repercussions, because I believe that we have so much faith in science to come through. But there's a lot of people dead from this pandemic that science didn't come through for them. The report, which is a collaboration of more than 100 experts from 35 global institutions, including the World Health Organization, World Bank, University College London, and Tsinghua University in Beijing, also details some ramifications of global warming. In 2018, the US alone, pollution caused more than 68,000 people to die prematurely. About 25,000 of those deaths were due to particulates released into the air by the agriculture and transportation industries, according to the report. I mean, personally, I think this is just small. I mean, it's obviously not small to those people that died, but in terms of like the impact of climate change on human health, it's really kind of like a looming, it's just around the corner type of situation, where you think about how many people are going to die because we can't grow crops, or because crops get destroyed by the weather. Those are the kind of things, or that pandemics are just kind of become part of the norm. If you take coronavirus and you attribute it to climate change, well, you can add, I don't know how many deaths we're up to now, but let's just use the United States as an example. You can add 250,000 plus deaths to this 68,000 and attribute it to climate change in one way or another. Now, this says air pollution is a silent killer. Air pollution and water pollution, we haven't really even gotten into that on this channel, which we will, because Fukushima is like one of my favorite things to talk about. Got him! Not really in a good way. But the water and the air is just becoming polluted, and that's because of how we utilize our resources. And then we also have climate change on top of that. This is just going over basically how many people have died from pollution, probably also from heat related deaths. That's really going up. And that's the thing about it, is that once we get past the breaking point and the temperature overall raises to 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, this whole heat induced conundrum is just going to be amplified. We can't survive. Not only can humans not survive in that temperature, but nothing can. And so everything that we rely on to survive will basically, dissolve into dust. Dangerous bacteria are also increasing in coastal waters. For example, Vibrio bacteria, which lives off northeast shores and can cause gastrointestinal distress, skin infections, and sometimes death, has increased as climate changes warm water and created more ideal salinity for its growth. Well, and it's interesting, there was this basically huge algae bloom off of one of the coasts in Russia. And I mean, it was putting people in the hospital, like surfers. Their eyes were burning and their skin was itching and all this stuff. And it was because of the heated waters and also fertilizer runoff. And you combine those two things together and it just blows up this algae. And that also makes a lot less oxygen in the ocean for, the animals. And then they die up. They just wash up on shore, and then that has implications down the food chain. So it's more than just a heating planet here. There's a lot of reasons why we're mucking up the planet, and how that's going to actually be our demise, in my opinion. And as seen in 2020, wildfire risk has exploded in recent years, and this is why I think that carbon sequestration using forests and those kinds of things, even the ocean, are starting to become irrelevant at this point. Because if we plant new trees, first of all, we have to water it, and there's drought, and then they're just going to start on fire because there's drought. And so you're not going to have that same carbon sink as a naturally occurring forest does when there's a stable weather pattern. In the US, we see clear evidence of how certain communities are more burdened by pre-existing inequities. So this starts to talk about who's going to be affected, and this is important. But what I think is even more important is this is just a preview of how everybody's going to be affected. Okay, that's what we need to take from this, is that right now it's going to be the poor, the impoverished, the people living on coastal communities. Those people are going to be the ones who are affected first. But you look at places like Africa where they don't have clean drinking water, that's going to come everywhere if we just keep polluting our water. I mean, only about 10% of the water on earth is drinkable. And, we can get into desalination, but not quite yet. And I guess that's the end of this article here. So this basically sums everything up, in my opinion, of what we're going to face. We're going to face pestilence, we're going to face famine, we're going to face an ecological disaster, and that's not even including all the pollution, all the radiation, and everything else that's going on right now in the world. So it's my opinion that we just need to wake up and stop pretending like this is a problem for another generation to fix, or that science is just going to come in here with a magic pill and reverse climate change. I mean, it takes money, it takes time, it takes technology, and it also takes people basically coming together, rallying behind some of these solutions instead of constantly bickering. So that's all I have to say about that article. I personally think that we're entering into a cascading effect here, and coronavirus gave us an opportunity to sit back and think about what's really going on. And I think some of us did that, and others haven't changed a bit. So we'll have to see how the next year or so goes. It's looking more and more like Biden's going to get into office. Don't get all frustrated and hit the nuke button.
Allahu Akbar!
But that's what it's looking like right now. And so we'll have to see what kind of strides we make here. And I think that it could be great in the end. I mean, I'd love to put solar panels on my house and try to see how net zero I can become personally. I don't use a dryer to dry my clothes, and it's only because my dryer broke. And because of COVID, I don't want people coming in and out of my house to fix my dryer. So I'll just go ahead and live my life without a dryer. And it's awesome because when I have my computer running, I don't feel so bad, because I'm like, well, look at how much energy I'm not using by foregoing the dryer, the clothes dryer. So we'll have to see what happens. I mean, are we really going to phase out gas cars? Electric cars are going to take over. Are they going to convert that to electric trucks? And then how are we going to get ships and planes green, and that kind of stuff, I think, is what's on the agenda for the next 5 years or so. And if we can't manage to wrangle that stuff in, there's no hope, in my opinion. And this whole idea that these things aren't going to affect us until 2100, that's a joke. And you can say that that's my opinion, and I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not a scientist and I need to do more research. But I've always been the kind of person where I feel like I'm very connected with nature.
Gay!
And I think that we've really come away from that as a species. We're not connected to nature like we used to be. Some of us are lucky enough to still be connected to nature in such a way, and I feel like I'm one of those types of people. And I can tell you, just from observing what's going on, this is going to come way faster than people think. It already is. And when you read things like the Arctic is already 5 degrees Celsius above average in 2020, that's an omen. That's what's going to come to the entire planet way before 2100. So we need to get our shit together here.
Do it! Just do it!
and figure out if we can even do this. And we're going to have to come together. We got to stop all the bickering, all the arguing, because all that does is lead to war. And when you have a societal collapse and a world war, you're not going to be paying attention to climate change. So let's get our act together. And on that note, I would just like to say that Andrew and I, we finally got Edge of Discord going. I mean, we're still in the very beginning of it. We're getting back on our feet, but we're putting out content. We've got a website. I'm going to go ahead and link that in the description. Andrew's been working really hard on that. He's kind of the webmaster here, and he's still working on some RSS feeds and whatnot, but it's got lots of news, and I think we really don't agree on the same news, but that's good. That's what I think Edge of Discord should be and will turn into, is a good conversation between differences in opinions, especially when it comes to what is propaganda. And we also have, we're going to try something called Tinfoil Hat Tuesdays. So on Tuesdays, we're going to talk about conspiracies, talk about all kinds of different stuff, maybe talk about Mandela effect and Planet Nine and all that kind of stuff. And there'll be aliens and all that good stuff in there on Tinfoil Hat Tuesdays. And we'll have a live podcast on Friday night, so we'll start streaming that from Edge of Discord at YouTube. And then we're basically going over articles from the website. We'll break those articles down, and then we'll release one a day for 5 days during the week. We've already released 3. I think we missed one this week because Andrew was having some internet problems, but no big deal. Like I said, we're just getting it off the ground. So if any of you are interested or you're already listening to us over there, I'm going to link the website in the description, and I'll also link some of the videos we've put out. And hopefully some of you are interested in coming over there and checking us out. It's definitely different having Andrew because he's got a different perspective than I do. And so it keeps it interesting, to say the least. And with that, I'll let you go. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you next time.